Welcome to a new video and a new study to go through about motivation and meaning. This next one is a longitudinal one, being about self-control and achievement. It's a longitudinal study between academic self-control and achievement motivation. Whoops, wrong one. Haha. This is a study that looks at the problem of the lack of self-control in adolescents in two groups, from 11 to 13-year-old and 14 to 16-year-old, and how to better their self-control via interventions. There's two examples of way to do this, which is to improve achievement motivation is attainment value and mastery approach goal pursuits. They're looking at data, publicly available data from Korea from 2010 and 3 years, so from 2010 to 13. And in one sense you could say that finding meaning-based goals early could potentially replace these, seeing as a lot of research that I found shows that meaning is a very good source of motivation and self-control. And as a quote from the study, however, the longitudinal causality between achievement motivation and self-control at the within-person level after controlling for relatively stable traits remain ambiguous. It is also unclear whether motivation precedes self-control as a mental energy or follows self-control. And I would ask if there is a reason to think there is a causal relationship between motivation and self-control. Not sure there is, but if anything, I think motivation comes first, but they don't really present a reason to assume that in this study. As another quote, researchers have assumed that self-control is stable throughout one's lifetime. However, developmental neuroscientists have recently underscored the importance of adolescence as the second most sensitive period for self-control development, meaning they have found ways to actually improve self-control as a trait or mental energy, depending on how you look at it. And this kind of goes to show that history tells us assumed facts is often later proved to be incorrect through evidence. And looking at some aspects of self-control presented in this study, it is described that in South Korea, which is where they took the data from, grades highly determines later opportunities, and thus there is a school-based grade ranking system. And this is creating a high degree of competition and external pressures to perform. This motivates external reward seeking, and thus the premature function of cognitive control, which enables the postponement of immediate rewards and the pursuit of long-term goals from the social honor system. It is a source of motivation, but long-term I don't think it's the best, there is evidence to show that this is not the best way to do it that is referred to in this study. But that is kind of the situation in which the data they have of South Korea. So, it is postured that as opposed to control of emotions and impulses, self-control is deliberately chosen of the value of what is needed what you need self-control for is greater than the results of impulses. So, as a quote, when individuals anticipate future rewards to be greater than the cost of immediate cognitive exertion required by self-control, they deliberately chose to engage in self-control to achieve their long-term goals. And this kind of shows the benefit of meaning-based goals, which has a higher and long-term reward function, if you will. Seeing that, so that if you value the long-term benefits, then you will exert self-control as opposed to be controlled by impulses. But as with many things, this is depending on the person and their personality, if you will. Galla et al., a study from, and others, a study from 2018, looked at situated expectancy value theory in academic context, and they consistently found that intrinsic value positively and strongly predicted adolescents' self-control, academic self-control. By contrast, utility value showed some inconsistencies. And this kind of is very much in tune, so to speak, with other psychology knowledge, if you will, because we have found in many different ways that intrinsic motivation works better and is stronger, if you will, than external sources of motivation. And then some perspectives of self-control in this study. Self-control is looked at as a personality trait here and can be compared to the conscientiousness trait in the Big Five model of personality, and possibly opposed to the openness trait. And as with most psychology, motivation is individualized. Quote, more precisely, an individual's inclination to exert effort and excel in the tasks, an example, work mastery motivation, is a strong predictor of mastery approach goals, whereas individuals strive to win and outperform others, competitive motive, is associated with performance approach goals. So, yeah, performance is competitive and to excel in tasks is performance based, which makes sense. At the between level, quote, the correlation between the random intercepts of self-control and attainment value was significantly positive. Gender negatively predicted the random intercepts of self-control, which implies that girls showed less trait-level self-control than boys. I'm not gonna sit here and assume or pretend to understand everything that it says here, but you can kind of get an idea of what they found, being that there is a high connection between its self-control and attainment value. Meaning if you have high self-control at the same time as you also have high attainment value of the thing you are working on attaining, if you will. So, as I did right here, I don't know much about the statistics yet, but finding indicates a positive relationship between self-control and attainment value. And this, but also that this is higher in boys than girls. If this might be true in broader perspective, don't know, but This is what it shows for the data in Korea at least. The adolescents who were better at self-control at T5, which is the first year of the 3 years in this context, tend to pursue higher attainment value in T6 the following year than those who were poor at self-control, indicating that self-control can facilitate higher goal setting. So if you then via self-control achieves things, then you set higher goals afterwards, because you then see that I actually managed to do this kind of thing. But also that middle adolescents' increased perception of attainment value in their prior year can lead to enhanced self-control in the following year, indicating that awareness or focus on attainment value initially precedes self-control, meaning you need a target to aim at to be able to hit it. How can you hit the goal if you don't have it? Makes sense. Looking at some more results they found in the study, specifically in early cohorts, meaning the younger ones, the mean, which is a measure of a average, but not an average because they find it with different methods, but yeah, it's a measure of all the measured variables, i.e. self-control, attainment value, and mastery approach goals, gradually decreased as the adolescents grew up, which I find interesting. The results for the relation between self-control and attainment value was more or less same for relation between self-control and mastery goal, except the aspect of attainment value focus leading to self-control. I'm not entirely sure what this kind of refers to, but that, yeah, the self-control, the attainment value and the mastery approach were more or less the same in how it affected self-control. Our multi-group random intercept cross-lagged panel model with 2 different adolescent cohorts revealed a strong association between achievement, motivation, and self-control at the between-person level regardless of adolescent cohorts, which kind of tells you more or less the same thing, that there is a connection between achievement, motivation, and self-control, regardless of the early or late cohorts or groups. A recent study reveals that adolescents experience greater benefits from pursuing mastery approach goals in the realm of self-control as opposed to pursuing performance goals, which is kind of what I pointed out, or intended to at least earlier, that a mastery approach, being that you more or less compete with yourself becoming better or mastering something, is a better source of motivation than if you compete with others and only want to be better than others, or performing with reference to an external measure, if you will. And in the conclusion of the research, it states, we infer that during early adolescence, students can be steered by the influence of stable trait-like self-control, as it potentially impacts their adoption of mastery approach goals and internalization of attainment value. During the middle adolescence, however, students' self-control behavior appear to be shaped and affected by the subjective importance placed on academic tasks through the association of tasks with their identity formation. If I do understand it correctly, that kind of shows that when you grow up and focus more on finding out who you are, creating an identity for yourself, that might be a higher priority, if you will, than the learning things in school and thus affecting the self-control, which is an interesting developmental psychology aspect. If you want to read this study yourself, you find the link here. I can also place that in the description of this video. I hope you found it interesting and learned something from it, and hope you will also find some interest in future videos. Thanks for watching. I see many people that lack motivation as a result of not enough meaning in their lives. You might wonder what meaning has to do with motivation. My bachelor's paper shows that what people consider meaningful is also what they consider important. And if something is important enough, we will do it. This tells me that meaning is important for motivation. Tom Bailu, among others, have stated, quote, "Humans are meaning-making machines." My goal here is to help people learn more about themselves and help them find a long-term meaningful goal in life. So if you have not found your interest and struggle with motivation, you might want to visit my website at whori.org and see if this is for you. Which is here. You can either contact me here or look around and see if it's for you, and if it still is, you can contact me here. Or if you want to know more, you can click this link to schedule a call. I am located in Norway, and if you want a physical meeting with me, that can be arranged, and my Norwegian website is kvenereg.org, which looks more or less the same. And with that, I wish you well on your journey.